Kaepernick, before anyone says anything, no one would say that he's the better quarterback, but he's damn sure better than plenty of the quarterbacks who have contracts.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Adam has created a sports labor roundup for us this week. So, Adam, talk to us about what's been going on in the last little bit with the sports balls.
Sure. I guess since this is the first time we're doing this segment, I'll give a little bit of introduction here. I know that I can't be the only person who's really into unions who's also a sports fan. I know that person is not Jacob, but but I'm one of those people. I played sports when I was young. I was always short and scrawny and slow. So, and uncoordinated. Not a great combination to be an athlete. Had plenty of heart, but that'll only take you so far. But in addition to, playing sports like many folks, especially here in the South, I grew up watching sports, big football fan, New Orleans Saints fan, and college football. Of course, Atlanta Braves. I was always into basketball. I remember the Jordan years. That's one of my early memories of the first house I ever lived in was watching Michael Jordan and the iconic Bulls team take down Karl Malone and the Utah Jazz. So I have a lot of fond memories of sports, and it's one of, the connections I still have to my native Mississippi, where I'm from. And I also remember labor coming up in the sports conversation. I think I've mentioned on the show before that, really until the last few years, I recall hearing about unions and strikes and collective bargaining agreements more from ESPN than CNN. In the context of professional athletes who are all unionized and some of the disputes they would have with the owners, who are mostly billionaires. So that's something that also has resonated with me, and I just got the idea that maybe we should talk a little bit about sports from the labor perspective. And, I know that's not new. There's some really great folks out here doing that kind of work already. But I wanted to just touch on a few of the major issues that have happened in sports over the past month or so. And if you guys are interested and if you want to hear more, be happy to do this, every month and just kind of take a look at sports, but from a labor unionist perspective and not just a typical fan perspective. Or oftentimes what we get from sports media is very much from the owner's perspective or from the league perspective. And that's not what we're about on this show. We're about the people. We're about the workers who actually create the wealth, not the bosses, not the profits. So on that note, I think we should start with baseball. Jacob mentioned baseball from Jonah Furman's update, who gets the bird. And by now you know that the Players Union has agreed with the Major League Baseball League, and the lockout has ended. So I wanted to point to a great article by Dave Zirin. He is the sports editor of The Nation. He also has the Edge of Sports podcast. He's written quite a bit of books about these kinds of issues. But he had a great article, Baseball is Back, and a couple of things that he mentioned in there that stood out to me. Some of this we actually covered previously on the show. We did do some analysis of the profits of these teams and the salaries of these players. So if you missed that, check it out on YouTube or Spotify, wherever you find us. Jacob pulled some charts. We also had some help from our friends at the Means Morning News, who did a great segment on this. But baseball is back. But that's really no thanks to the owners. The union had to fight incredibly hard to end this lockout. It lasted, if I'm not mistaken, 99 days. the lockout lasted. And, of course, contract negotiations would have started even well before then. So we're talking about, quite a lengthy process that the league and its owners were really refusing to bargain in good faith. And I think that has been widely recognized, even in sports media. And that's something that I've been pleasantly surprised about, is that it seems like most folks kind of knew who the good guys and the bad guys were in this situation. And it was easy because the billionaire owners made it easy in this case. But sometimes that's a lot harder to parse out because folks hear about some massive salaries. You hear about big-time athletes like LeBron James or Tom Brady who command these massive contracts, and they command advertising deals. They start their own companies. But the truth is that is not the average athlete's experience. And in fact, there are, regardless of what, sport you're talking about or what league you're talking about, the athletes tend to have short careers and make far, far below the, big-time numbers that tend to grab the attention. So back to baseball. Baseball is back. A couple of the highlights. The median salary, which has decreased over the past 7 years, 33%. Hopefully that's going to be changing now. They did increase the minimum salary by 23%. But one thing that they did not secure in this contract that I know they were fighting for was a wage or a salary floor for the team as a whole. In other words, a certain threshold that every baseball club would have to spend on their salaries. And the reason why that's relevant, the reason why the players were advocating for this is because you have, if you're a fan, you know this, you have numerous teams, particularly in baseball, that tank every year. They intentionally lose for multiple reasons. Sometimes it's strategic. They think, hey, if we lose now and we lose next year, in a couple years we'll have enough draft picks, we'll have enough money in the bank, we can, go all in, and that's when we'll recover. Occasionally that works, but more often than not, you have teams who are just saving money on salaries while still raking in big bucks. And the fans get a pretty crappy experience because their teams are always losing. Nobody wants to go see a team that sucks. But there are plenty of owners in baseball who intentionally make it the case, but still want to charge outrageous prices to get into the games. And a lot of fans have been priced out of, not just baseball, but all sporting events. And that all leads me to a certain senator from Vermont, Senator Bernie Sanders. For those of you who are not familiar with a little bit of his backstory, it was actually seeing the Brooklyn Dodgers pulled out from his community that got him into politics in a lot of ways. That really helped him understand the ways in which corporate power can affect communities. So he's always kind of had this thing about baseball. And now I'm pretty sure Major League Baseball is not too happy about this because he has actually proposed legislation called the Save American Baseball Act. And what this legislation would do is remove the exemptions that MLB has under the Sherman Antitrust Act. Sherman Antitrust Act, it's over 100 years old. It was part of the trust busting when, the progressive movement was able to push to where the federal government would actually break up some of these monopolies. You can look around and see that they haven't done a very good job of that as of late or the last few decades. But it's there. But not for Major League Baseball. MLB actually has special exemptions from this trust-busting act. And not even other professional leagues have this degree of exemption. So it sets up a monopoly that the Major League Baseball and its owners have over professional baseball. And, of course, they're all capitalists, but they don't necessarily love competition. So Bernie has put this act out. So far, he's the only sponsor, at least, as the time I was researching this. But we'll see if it gains traction because, this could really shake things up. This could shake things up in terms of the power of the players to bargain. Because, like, right now, if someone tried to start another professional league to rival MLB, the players who got involved could be blacklisted, the coaches, everyone involved. It would be near impossible to get off the ground. Even without the, protections MLB enjoys, it still would be difficult, but it certainly could shake things up. And when the agreement was signed between the union and the league, here's what Senator Sanders had to say. These are baseball oligarchs who negotiated in bad faith for more than 100 days in a blatant attempt to break the players' union. These are baseball oligarchs who, over the last year, eliminated their affiliation with over 40 minor league teams, not only causing needless economic pain and suffering, but also breaking the hearts of fans in small and mid-sized towns all over America. It would not surprise you to learn that Burlington, Vermont, was one of those cities and towns that had their minor league baseball team taken away. So, again, obviously, it's quite personal for Senator Sanders, and I really applaud him for taking this stand. Moving on to football, even though it's March, football always seems to dominate the sports headlines. And I wanted to point out that about a month or so ago, Brian Flores was hired as a defensive coach for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers, Mike Tomlin, is one of the only African-American coaches we've had in the NFL in a little while, or who was at the time he was the only one. I believe there have been some new hires recently, but the reason that's important is because Flores was fired as the head coach of the Miami Dolphins after this past season, despite having a decent enough record. There were certainly plenty of coaches who would have earned a firing well before him. And he felt it was BS, as many of us did. So he filed a lawsuit. And he is pursuing it as a class action discrimination lawsuit. And that's something that, so MLB is looking at being shaken up by Congress. This lawsuit could really shake things up in the NFL. And, a couple of things that he pointed out in his discrimination suit is that you have 32 owners of these teams, most of them billionaires. None of them are black. But 70% of the NFL players are black. There is a massive disparity in who is playing versus who is coaching, owning, managing these teams. And so you have folks who are profiting off of the labor of a majority black workforce. Doesn't reflect the diversity of their workforce. Now, personally, my opinion would be much better if these teams were publicly owned by the people, by the communities in which they rest. As it is, they are, by and large, privately owned, but publicly subsidized. Because in case after case after case, these teams manage to get cities to build new stadiums for them and to write them these massive subsidies and tax incentives to stay in a city. But all that aside, it's clear that there is a issue with racism and discrimination and bias inside National Football League. And my hat's off to Brian Flores for being willing to take a stand, because he's acknowledged that this may mean he never gets to be a head coach ever again. So I applaud him. Good for Flores for taking a stand. We'll see, what develops out of that. But it's hard not to see how obvious this is in terms of coaching and in terms of who actually is making the big bucks in upper management of these teams, while these guys are out here putting their bodies on the line, shortening their lifespans. And just like in baseball, the average player is having a very short career, much, much lower salaries than what a Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers can command. And on that note, sticking with football, I do want to mention Deshaun Watson, former football player for the Houston Texans. He was a outstanding quarterback, very well regarded. You may know that he has not been playing for the past year or so. He is facing 22 allegations of sexual assault and misconduct. He's got quite the laundry list of lawsuits facing him, but it was just announced today that a second grand jury has declined to press charges on him. A few days ago was the first time a grand jury declined, and so that was sort of taken as an opportunity by the league to rehabilitate him, to get him back into the game, and teams, and even my beloved New Orleans Saints went after him to try to get him. So Cleveland Browns have given him a contract guaranteeing $230 million. It's a pretty massive contract, even for a quarterback in the NFL. Now, like any good unionist, I believe in due process. He has not been charged with any crimes. He's not been convicted of any crimes. And so, I would like to see due process for Mr. Watson. He deserves it just like we all do. Certainly want to see justice for all of the alleged victims. But the only reason I bring it up is because it's hard to process that, here we have a guy who, best case scenario is coming with a lot of baggage. He's getting a record contract, and yet Colin Kaepernick is still at home. Can't get a contract. Can't even hardly get a workout. And, Kaepernick, before anyone says anything, is not as good as Deshaun Watson. There's no dispute about that. No one would say that he's the better quarterback, but he's damn sure better than plenty of the quarterbacks who have contracts and who have even started games over the past 5 years. So, shout out to Colin Kaepernick. It's BS that you're still at home. I hate that you're not getting a contract, but hopefully that'll change. Again, it's hard to justify that you've got a guy with 22 allegations out there and somehow that's acceptable baggage to not only get a contract but to get a record contract. But yet Colin Kaepernick, because of his protest and the protest that really he helped kick off inside the football league and the issues of racism he pointed to inside football, but also inside of our broader society and with policing in particular, he's too controversial. He can't even get, a spot on the bench. All right.
Yeah.
Last thing I'll say is shout out to the women's soccer team. The National Women's Soccer Union actually won a historic contract last month. And now the union's only been around since 2017. They organized in the face of some pretty terrible conditions. I was not aware of this until researching this. I saw the news for the contract, but it wasn't until just recently I realized that before this contract, these women for the National Women's Soccer League had a starting salary of $22,000.
Woo!
$22,000. And so one of the campaign, associated with their contract campaign was a hashtag, no more side hustles. Because as you can imagine, at $22,000, most of these women were having to take on second and third jobs. As professional athletes, that's quite difficult to do, to manage your schedule. You're traveling, you have a very demanding workout schedule, and you're still having to have side hustles just to make your rent. It's astounding. So the National Women's Soccer Union has been bargaining since 2020, and like I said, just last month they were able to secure this historic contract, including a 160% increase in the minimum salary. So they did get it up to, $35,000. Still pretty low, but that's a pretty dramatic increase. So shout out to the women of the soccer league who've done this. It will come as no surprise that it took a credible strike threat to get their win.
those tend to get results.
Right. They made it clear they were prepared to stop work, that they were prepared not to show up to training camp, and lo and behold, the Board of Governors was able to finally, after nearly 2 years of negotiation, sign a contract. So, all that said, professional athletes are workers. They sell their labor in exchange for a salary. Many of them are much more highly compensated than any of us on this show or listening to this show. But they are workers nonetheless. And so whenever there is a dispute between workers and management, we know what side we're on.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.